Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to talk about the reality of what some of you guys might say, like a male loneliness crisis, epidemic. I'm not sure the terminology, but why so many men are lonely, especially nowadays. I did make a video on this topic previously, but there is so much research to speculate and understand this particular concept that I made a follow up. Plus, a lot of you guys were talking about it. It's a pretty frequent topic that comes up in the comment section. And so I wanted to put more research behind it and make another video with more details, more speculation, more research so that we can understand, okay? So the definition of male loneliness based on research done in 2024 and 2023, both of them will be linked below, is we can see, first of all, loneliness is what we describe as, I want to say like almost like an adverse or uncomfortable emotional response related to the perceived discrepancy between social connections that a person has versus the one that they desire, okay? So that's loneliness in general. When applied to men specifically, however, we can perceive this as a male's experience of this subjective disconnection, okay? Where they might feel a lack of meaning, satisfying social or emotional relationships, to which we kind of can see that gender context of gender norms, life transitions, and other factors shape how this particular man, hypothetical man, connects with other folks, okay? So loneliness is different than being alone, right? We had just described based on this research. Alone is an individual who is not physically in, I guess, the context, premise, whatever it is, to other individuals to some extent, okay? Loneliness is a feeling. It's an emotional response based on perceived discrepancy between the social connections that you have versus the one that you desire, okay? You're going to feel lonely typically, okay? So let's talk about the factors that contribute to this situation, and that's kind of the main majority of this video. We're going to talk about how this is occurring, and we're going to talk about the research, and we're going to break that down, okay? So as we've mentioned, one of the main reasons that men can feel lonely is their perception, right? But why that's occurring is sometimes they may have a relationship that has dissolved. A very common one is divorce. And I see this a lot in my practice. A lot of men that I work with, a lot of them seek therapy during a separation or during that divorce. And part of the reason why is because they have this increased loneliness and they feel that they often heavily relied on that particular romantic partner for emotional connection. And that loss is very fundamental to them, okay? So research done in 2018 and 2024 does show that men do experience more significant loneliness based on the relationship being dissolved. This is just based on the research, and this can contribute to men feeling more lonely because, as we've seen, divorce is a little bit more, I don't know how much more common, but it is getting more common, and women do initiate divorce more often, right? And so we already know these kind of details. And we're seeing that the relationship being dissolved is one of the contributing factors. That is the reality of men being lonely. The next one is actually social isolation, but I think a better way to word it, I say, is kind of like a lower frequency of meaningful connections. Because I think it's both. Some men are not necessarily socially isolated, but their connections are not as meaningful in comparison to their female counterparts, okay? Men tend to have infrequent contact with friends, family, or even social groups in comparison to female counterparts, to which they feel like they're not necessarily as deeply understood. And this creates a higher risk of loneliness based on research done in 2025 and 2024. Men often form connections through activities, which is good. However, it creates a sense of lacking of emotional disclosure, which in fact reduces the depth of social bonds, which creates a higher risk, a heightened risk of feeling lonely in comparison, okay? The next one is actually traditional gender norms. Now, I understand that a lot of people might be uncomfortable with this particular variable. However, it is a true variable, and I feel like not saying it is dishonest on my part. I try to be honest with you guys as much as I can and remain as unbiased as possible. I try. I'm a human, so of course I'm nowhere near perfect. So I'm not trying to offend anybody, but this is one of the contributing factors, okay? And I do think it's important to talk about. The gender role of men, masculinity to some extent, is they actually are expected to suppress their emotions. They tend to be more self-reliant, and they avoid vulnerability. And so because of that, we're seeing that men tend to have fewer intimate social connections, and they actually report higher levels of loneliness in comparison to their female counterparts. And what ends up happening is they may not even realize that this is abnormal, because they feel like the only way to get that connection is to have some sort of emotional disclosure and seeking support, but they feel that that's less masculine of them to do so, or they will be rejected to some extent based on their social norms. And so they actually, even if they might feel lonely, they may not necessarily reach out or try and resolve the feeling. They may just battle it or feel it inwardly, but it creates an effect which can create other issues down the line, right? And so research was done in 2024 and 2023, okay? The next one is interesting, and I see this a lot in therapy as well. We can see sometimes life transitions and structural changes within the family or whatever it may be, which creates this increase of men feeling lonely, okay? So let's give an example of some of these transitions so that you can understand the clarity of what I'm talking about, okay? Life transitions such as a job loss, retirement is a really common one, okay? Unfortunately, long-term disability can increase loneliness in men. Now, the reason why this is based on research 2022 and 2024, men tend to have a sense of, they feel purpose towards their work or structured roles. And often part of those structured roles create social connections that they didn't really have to maintain necessarily. So colleagues, maybe let's say you're a construction worker, and often you work with a lot of the same folks on whatever projects you're doing. That actually helps you to maintain social connections. But let's say for whatever reason, you're no longer being contracted, or perhaps you hurt yourself. That might be a better way to put it. You hurt yourself on the job and you feel that it's long-term and you can no longer work. Hopefully no one's ever experienced that in my audience, but I know it's common. I know it happens. So I'm sorry to anybody that does, but long-term disability. So now you are no longer able to engage not only in your work, but the social situations and connections that you in fact maintained due to that, okay? That's unfortunate. And the very last one, which is very similar to the masculine role concept we talked about, but this one's a little bit different. I would say it's a little more specific, which is why I put it in there, and I use different research to find these points, okay? Research done in 2021 and 2023. Men often have a reluctance to seek help, okay? As a therapist, I see this. Most of my patients are men, just because I specialize in a lot of things that a lot of men struggle with. Anger is a common one. But what ends up happening is men don't seek help unless it's very, very severe, right? A lot of patients that seek me, it's only after SI or divorce or some sort of severity to which they realize they really do need help. And they often suppress emotions and avoid seeking help, to which that they're not sharing with other people, which it limits social connection. And it also limits the ability for them to feel helped and cared about, which makes them feel more lonely. If you're battling something and nobody's there to help you, the feeling of loneliness will be increased because you know that you're struggling with someone and you're independent in doing such, okay? So I hope this video was helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.